Hello, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. It is Wick back with another Wicked Weekly Windup, episode 5. We are now officially done with the first month of this show, and congrats on everyone who's still here. I know last week I said I was going to do the Gay Ozian history topic, but long story short, change of plans, and I had someone in my Discord send me another Wicked fanfic. So I did want to kind of read that first, because I get it that as a writer, even if you don't mind waiting, there is that anticipation of someone's gonna read my stuff. Oh, I can't wait. Have you read it yet? How about now? You know what I mean? So I'm gonna read this other Wicked fic. Then next week will be the Gay Ozian history thing, and I'll try to make like a cutesy PowerPoint so that way it's a little bit entertaining and to make up for the people that are waiting. Because I know somebody else in my Discord server kept voting for that one, so I'm sorry that I've put you on the back burner so much. But before we get into all of that of this next week, let me do my previously on. Since last week was the first round of Gelphie fanfic, I had asked people what their records were. Even if I only prefer to read one-shots and things I can get done in one episode, obviously there's plenty of great stories out there that are novel length. I don't know the lengths of these two, but I did get one comment, and since it was only one and I don't know if they want to remain anonymous, I'm just going to read the comment. But if there was anyone out there that was like, no, but I did leave a comment on your blank, feel free to yell at me in the comments and I'll read it next week. I might have missed it. But I got Learn Me Right by Gretchen Maurice and The Love Club by Wagyu Beefy. And now for this week's question, it'll be a little different in that it won't have any direct correlation to the topics of the week. It's just actually a friend of mine and I were talking about the costumes, and I was saying, oh, it's just a shame that if you look at Elphaba's Wicked 2 Black Witch dress, it's very detailed. But of course, when you're watching it from afar or you're watching a slime tutorial, it's hard to see the details. And I'm like, there's so many costumes that don't, in my opinion, get the full love they deserve just by nature of it being hard to see them if you're not, like, literally right here. So my question to you guys is, what is your favorite Wicked costume in the whole show? Whether it's, like, you know, Elphaba or Glinda's dress, or even if you're like, oh, that robe that Dillaminda wore, or that fez hat that Chester had. You know, it doesn't have to be anything fantastic. It can be little things, too. Because I'll say right now, I really like Elphaba's glasses already in the movie. Like, with the infinity-looking shape, that's really cool. But I'll give you my favorite costume next week. That was more just inspired by a discussion I was having with a friend. Um, anyway, so that's the question for next week. And probably what I'm going to do now is use this also as the wind up, or the wind down, I guess, for the episode. Since, again, last week I read a short fanfic that took me about 10 minutes, so I know this one's going to probably take me double, because it's also short, but it's about double the length. So I'm going to end this video here, and then next video is going to be the read aloud, which I might post as like a part 2. But I'm just going to end it from there. There won't be an outro, so I'm trying to double this as the outro. But I believe that is all that I have for you all this week. And again, please proceed on to part 2. Don't just click away. But I hope to see everyone back here next week for the other Wicked Weekly Windup, where I'll finally get around to the gay history video in July. And I did actually want to say, you know, here's my latest Wicked shirt. I only have 4, so you're going to start seeing repeats pretty soon. But it's just the next gayest one I had. One short gay. Alright, here we go. As you guys can see, this one's kind of a long one, at least in terms of my reading speed. So I'm just going to get right into it. But today we have To See the Future in Blood and Rubies by Show Me the Future. It's funny, that title's so intense, and then the summary is Elphaba, Glinda, and the bowl of stew that defined them. I love it. Notes. Inspired by the discussion in the Discord. It wasn't my Discord. No, I'm just kidding. Because in hindsight, I was like, there's got to be another Wicked Discord out there somewhere. But I swear that when I looked, I didn't find any, so that's why I wanted to make it my own. But anyways, the Discord regarding what Elphaba's favorite food would be, and the popular idea that she had a soft spot for quadling cuisine. Interesting premise, I like that. There are many other fun summaries I could have used for this pick. But Elphaba becomes a Karen, Glinda shows affection through soup, charm circle dinner party where Glinda just stares at Elphaba the whole time, so canon. And anyways, this pick is pretty much entirely unedited and based purely on vibes and book verse. Story of my life. I mean, I do edit my fics and they're still not the greatest. But I relate to the based on vibes and sort of book verse. Although mine tend to fluctuate, where I'll take from both canons at the same time and be like, I don't know what to call this. But anyways, again, sorry, I need to get reading into this. It was a cozy evening in late fall, and the Charm Circle had planned a relaxing dinner as a break from their studies. The group had been wandering aimlessly through the town square, contemplating which cafe to dine at, when Elphaba froze in her tracks in front of a small blackboard listing a particularly high-end cafe's daily specials. Ruby stew! Oz, I can't believe they actually have it! Elphaba hurried into the cafe and looked as though she had nearly burst from excitement. Glinda, Fiero, Crope, and Tibbet could barely keep up. I don't think I've ever seen her this excited about food before, Fiero remarked, trying to catch his breath as he approached the maitre d'. Table for 5, please. I don't think she could even be excited about food, Crope added as the host saw them to their table, a cozy little corner booth. Just look at her. She's a twig. Hardly eats at all. So true. Food aside, I don't think I've ever seen our dear Miss Elphaba this excited about anything before. I have, a few times. Glinda started, recalling fondly how enthusiastic Elphaba would get about her philosophy readings or her latest animal research. But not anything material like a soup. It's not a soup, Miss Glinda, Elphaba corrected as they sat down at the table. Crope and Tippet sat next to each other, Fiero sat in the corner spot next to them, Glinda sat next to Fiero, and Elphaba on the outside. It's a stew, an old Quadling country specialty, used to sustain the miners and the dam builders. It's rich and hearty and the most delicious thing I've ever eaten. I'm so excited to share it with you all. Yeah, I love this idea of like an Ozian potluck, since they're all from different parts of Oz, where they all bring together a different dish from a different region of Oz. Like, it'd be really cool if we could do that IRL. Glinda smiled as Elphaba continued to gush about various Quadling delicacies. She'd seen her enthusiastic before, and even happy on rare occasions, but never had she expected Elphaba to be so openly joyful like this. It must be a truly incredible stew, then, to elicit such a passionate, emotional response from her otherwise reserved companion. Later, a waitress approached the table to take their orders. And what will each of you be having today, darlings? Yeah, I'm going to give side characters interesting comedic voices just so that way you guys don't get bored listening to me read in the same voice all the time. But if anyone doesn't like that, feel free to let me know, because I'm not in any way trying to annoy the ears or insult the fic. I'm just trying to, keep my own voice interesting. 5 bowls of ruby stew, please, Elphaba spoke up quickly. And if you have any artisan quadling breads or wines. Quadling? The waitress paused. Well, I guess if the way she words this implies she's not quadling, so I probably shouldn't give her a southern accent. But then again, I'm giving her an American southern accent, so I'm not doing it right anyways. Quadling? The waitress paused. No, we don't have any of the quadling specialties. Bread, will a Gillikin sour loaf do? Ooh, I love sour loaf. Elphaba raised an eyebrow to Glinda in question, for she was in fact Gillikin. Glinda froze for a moment. She'd been so caught up in the glow of Elfie's passion that she hadn't been paying full attention. Me too. Oh yes, a sour loaf would be delicious. And wine, the waitress followed up. We don't have anything from the QC, but if you're still looking for something a bit exotic, might I recommend a bottle of the elderflower wine from the Emerald City's finest winery? Fine, better than nothing, I suppose, Elphaba said with a resigned sigh and handed the waitress her menu. I'll pay for the soup and the bread and the wine, but everyone else can order what they please. As the waitress went around the table to collect more orders, Glinda stole another glance. Elphaba had gone from uncharacteristically bubbly to dead silent in a matter of seconds. Sure, the silence was typical of her, but after such a drastic mood swing, she watched herself unwrap her silverware and fidgeted with the corner of the fabric napkin. Glinda didn't order anything besides the soup. She didn't have much of an appetite after seeing Elphaba fall so suddenly. The boys were having some boisterous conversation about a rowdy party they'd been to recently, and Glinda didn't much care to listen, instead focusing solely on Elphaba, taking her hand carefully. Hey, this is the good stuff. Elphie, are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine, Elphaba stuttered, just a little surprised they'd have ruby stew on the menu without bothering to get the appropriate bread and wine to accompany it. Really? That's it? Glinda had to stifle a, I didn't think you could be such a snob when it came to food. I am not being a snob, Elphaba snapped, attracting the attention of the boys, as well as a few neighboring tables. She collected herself and quieted down quickly. I grew up in the QC, and food is very important to me. For all I know, I could be part quadling on my father's side. About that! What? Fiero asked in disbelief. Quadlings aren't usually green, from what I know. What makes you think you could be... My parents had a friend, a quadling glassblower. He's in my earliest memories, and I know he was incredibly close with both my mother and father. He couldn't be my father, honestly. He was like a third parent to me. Hell, surely you've seen the rosier hues to Nessa's skin? Glinda thought for a moment. How obvious it was now that Nessa was a quadling descent. Her stature, the slight reddish to her, the shoes made of silver and ruby. Turtleheart. His name was Turtleheart. He died when I was young, but I will never forget him. The somber silence fell over the table. Luckily, only seconds later, the waitress arrived with their food. Imagine getting your food that quickly. You have one conversation and the waitress is already back. 5 bowls of quadling ruby stew with fancy silver lids encrusted with obviously fake ruby gemstones of their own. I like this. Your descriptions are very good. Although I'm gonna laugh a little bit. Like quadling stew is apparently for like a hearty miner's dish, so it doesn't strike me as something that we considered regionally fancy. So it's funny to me that they're serving it like a delicacy. But then again, I mean, I have seen that where sometimes if you're far enough away from like the source, that you can get a fairly plain dish, but it'll still be served like dressed up because it does feel exotic to them, even if it's just something like a hearty stew for workers and not like, oh, here's some fancy like stuffed bird, drizzled with this fancy garnish and stuff. Anyways, let me keep going. Alphaba lightened back up once again, pouring herself a glass with the much anticipated elderflower wine and tearing off a hunk of bread, setting it on a small plate. Glinda was enamored with the stars in her eyes as she removed the elaborate lid from the bowl. The lid was massive. The bowl was not. Really, the bowl was more like a large plate with a divot in the middle, no bigger than an orange, and the bowl's portions was only about halfway filled with stew. Ah, that's why I hate fancy restaurants. I've never eaten there, but I've seen the tiny portion size, and I'm like, me with a tiny stomach would leave this restaurant hungry. How does any normal person eat here without, spending an arm and a leg on the first tiny portion, then another arm and a leg on what you need to fill up? Elphaba's face fell for the second time that evening. Not exactly the hearty portions that were served to the QC miners. This cafe is clearly more about presentation and aesthetic than portion size. Ah, took the words right out of my mouth. They're more about aesthetic than function. Feel your pain, girl. Trying not to let Elphaba's sour mood dampen her evening, Glinda took a bite of the stew. It was herbal and delicious and unlike anything she'd ever tasted before. She happily took a crust of bread and dipped it into the rich red broth, not caring that she was partaking in such an undignified manner of eating. This is surely the quadling way of enjoying the meal, after all. Yeah, first time I had Indian food, they were like, yeah, no, you just eat it with your hands. And I was like, really? Everything? And I made such a mess. And I at first was like, man, I'm so sorry. I'm leaving food everywhere. And they're like, no, that's normal. That's how you eat here. And I was like, oh. Because I'm used to American cuisine where you're supposed to use the utensils, and I'm still quite atrociously messy. Hold on, sorry. Okay, Elphaba still did not seem pleased. After careful inspection of the stew, she finally took a bite. At the first taste, she somehow grew greener, if such a thing were even possible, clearly disgusted with the dish in front of her. Oh, they don't make it like Mother made it. I think it's delicious, Glinda said, hoping that her positive opinion would ease Elphaba's judgments. It did not. This is a disgrace to Ruby Stew, to all of Quadling cuisine, really. Oh, what's wrong with it? Aside from the portion size. First off, this can hardly be called a stew. Look how runny it is. Oh, it's more of a soup, Elphaba said, demonstrating her point by dripping a spoonful of broth into the bowl. And the flavor profile is all wrong. Too watery, almost no depth of flavor. Quadling food is supposed to be spicy, so this recipe must have been adjusted for more northern palates. No offense, my sweet. None taken. This is good. Like, I feel like it's really accurate. Like, if you were to have a friend who went with a restaurant to you and had this problem, that this is exactly how they'd be. And actually, I did just notice I'm about at the 10-minute mark. I told you I'm about halfway done. So I'm going to pause it here and, of course, immediately resume for the part 2 where hopefully I can finish the rest of the fic before the 10-minute mark.